What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the LivBTR Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Siano, CEO of Sabre Advisors. On today's episode, I have my friend Susie Sherling. Susie's the head of Retail Leasing for the Northeast, West Coast, and Europe at Jamestown. An accomplished retail leasing professional with extensive experience across the U.S. and Europe, Susie is currently the Director of Leasing for Jamestown, overseeing key markets in the Northeast, West Coast, and Europe. In this role, she drives leasing strategies, cultivates relationships with leading retailers, and manages the leasing portfolio for the company's dynamic commercial properties. Susie is originally from London, and she's called New York City home for over 11 years, thriving on the energy of the city during the week and seeking respite in the fresh air of upstate New York on weekends. Outside of work, she is a passionate runner and an avid hot yoga and Pilates enthusiast. She enjoys cycling around the city with her kids, making the most of both urban life and the outdoors. Now you understand why we're friends, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
I just wanna have peace. Pay for the bill, let them take my card, never see the receipt. Good health, we prize, but everybody around prosperity.
What's up, guys, and welcome to the LivBTR Podcast. This is your host, Jay Siano, and this is the show for people trying to optimize every area of their life. Let's go.
I just want to have peace.
Susie Sherling, welcome to the LivBTR Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I am very excited to have you, and we've gotten to know each other recently, and we're going to get to know each other a lot more here. And I'm excited to do that.
Likewise. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you're the Director of Retail Leasing for Jamestown, and you have quite a bit of geography. So I'll let you explain that so I don't butcher it.
Thank you. So Jamestown has a portfolio in the US and Europe, and in Latin America. I shouldn't exclude that, but I oversee the West Coast, Northeast and European portfolio, whilst we have a huge conglomerate in the Southeast looking after itself right now. But yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So where's the accent from?
Can't you tell, Brooklyn?
I can.
I can
but,
tell. I can say good cup of coffee.
I thought it was the Bronx.
No, I'm trying. I'm originally from London.
Okay.
I've been in New York for 11 years.
And how did you get into the world of retail real estate?
That's a really good question. By default, I will say.
Me too.
I think we all did, right? Yeah. But we should have chosen it because it's fun.
100%.
And I wish
I just didn't know it existed.
Exactly.
It was more that, yeah.
I actually started out in residential in the UK, and it's a completely different format in the UK. The real estate worlds don't speak to each other across the Atlantic Ocean.
Interesting.
And so when I got here after being 8 years in the high-end luxury residential world, I came over here and be like, no thanks. I think I'm going to figure this out.
So meaning that you were in luxury residential for 8 years. Yeah. Moved to New York specifically?
Yeah.
And did you attempt to transition into that? Not even.
I
you
dabbled.
weren't reaching out to Ryan Serhant to
absolutely not. Okay. I think the idea of trying to create a community, having first just landed in New York, seemed very far-fetched.
Okay. It's interesting though, because I feel like most people wouldn't. They would just be like, this is what I'm already doing. New York's an amazing city. I'll just do this there.
I mean, you eat what you kill here, whereas in London it's a bit different. There's a system.
Explain.
Yes, you're working for the company.
Okay.
You're a representative of the company, not of yourself.
Got it.
The company gives you a salary, and you've got some stability there. And really, you're creating a community that you've probably grown up in your whole life, but you're utilizing that for your career, and you're really networking with friends on behalf of the business, holding up a reputation that really means a lot to the business and to you. Whereas over here, you are your own entity.
Yeah.
And it's a very different concept.
Do you feel the same way about brokers in the commercial space, as you do? How you just said that
so
about
interesting.
residential? Yeah.
As I'm saying this out loud, I am my own entity, right? We really want to uphold ourselves to the best that we can, and we are our own brands, living, breathing, walking the streets of New York, right?
Yes.
So, as much as I'm upholding the company's reputation today, I'm also upholding my own.
Sure.
And I'm thinking about the future and preserving that and making sure that we have just great relationships across the board, and those relationships have seeped in from my professional life into my personal life.
Right.
So it has become that way here, but it's taken 11 years to get there, I would say. And over time, what I've learned is you've got to love what you do. And it doesn't matter what you do, you just got to love it.
Yeah.
And if you don't love it, then how do you fall in love with it? What elements can you take from it to make it your world? Because essentially it is, if it's a minimum 5 out of the 7 days of the week that you're committing to it.
Yeah.
Minimum.
No, it's interesting because how you described you eat what you kill, and then on the residential side in London that you actually have some security. That's an interesting concept because I've never had security in my life, which is, kind of why like this career choice is a gift and a curse.
100%.
Yeah.
I can advocate for either approach. And I would say that at the end of the day, the eat what you kill could be metaphoric.
Totally.
Or could be quite literal.
Yeah.
And in London, even though you had that stability, the survival of the fittest was those that were predators in that sense, but in a good way. I think there's a negative connotation with that, but you really had to hone in on what you were doing, why you were doing it, and how you're going to be the best for yourself.
Yeah.
And I really emphasize for yourself because, again, you're your own brand at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Even though you're representing the company. So I think that tenacity in our field is really the underlying foundation to success, but it's not everything.
For sure. We're going to switch gears for a moment. I agree with you. And resilience comes into play.
Yes.
With those things.
Yes.
And you just went through a major life transition.
I did.
And I wasn't aware of that until I read the notes on my way here. And this is really about, I use this as a great excuse to get to learn from people. And I'm just trying to do the best that I can, and I'm very, I think, transparent about, like, yesterday I just decided to pick up my phone and talk into it about how, like, the holiday season's so great, but at the same time, like, my dad passed away last year on December 27th, thank you. After my mom passing 25 years ago, so like these things just make you who you are. Yeah. And it's impossible to pretend that as happy and positive as I am. And I said that yesterday, like I'm just genuinely wired that way.
Me too.
So tell me about what you're going through. Tell everybody listening about what you're going through. So
2 years ago, coming up to 2 years ago next week, my late husband was diagnosed with a stage 4 very rare cancer, thymic carcinoma. It's very rare. You wouldn't have heard of it. It's of the thymus. Do you know what the thymus is?
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it does.
It's an autoimmune organ that becomes somewhat obsolete at a certain age past puberty, and it sits there behind your heart and just does its thing. Or doesn't, in this sense. And so we found out that he had a brain tumor, actually, when we were in the Dominican Republic of December of 23.
What were the symptoms that he had?
Very mildly high blood pressure.
Really?
Very mild. As in nothing to write home about, but just enough to go and check at the local hospital in the Dominican Republic.
Okay.
And here's me thinking, it's fine, just routine check.
Yeah.
No big deal. They find this massive brain tumor. It was huge at the front of his brain. And I've got 2 young kids. At the time, they were 1.5 and 3.5.
Wow.
Sorry, 2 and 4.5. And my father was there and my in-laws were there. We were making a really big family holiday of it. And so they, in the end, send John, my husband, and his parents back to New York to get it checked out. I stay back in the Dominican, and 2 days later we find out that it is definitely a brain tumor and they're going to operate. So on Christmas Day, we fly back and he has a craniotomy. They remove the tumor, and luckily it wasn't as big as what it looked like, but they did say it wasn't primary, which we were so lucky at the time to have known. It was a secondary tumour and it was coming from the thymus. The primary tumour is in the thymus. Now, with that information, it took about 6 to 8 weeks to discover. And then the journey from there onwards was utterly mysterious. It was unprecedented. Not many had metastases to the brain. We were dealing with the best doctors in the country, maybe in the world, at MSK. And
I have a lot of familiarity with MSK. Yeah, I spent a lot of time there, a lot of holidays. Not my favorite place.
No, and I've just come off the back of that, so I know exactly what you went through.
Yeah.
And they are a wonderful team over there. But with this, we were just in the dark for the best part of a year and a half.
Yeah.
And all different types of chemos weren't working. And in the end, I would say October of 23, we just started a relentless journey of being in and out of hospitals.
Yeah.
And the metastases spread to the liver as well, which kind of made the journey harder.
Yeah.
And in July of this year, my husband passed away, sadly. But the beautiful part of that was that he was upstate in our home with his family and his friends surrounding him. And it was the most, I hate to say it, magical way to end.
Yeah.
And we're just lucky we got him out of the hospital when we did.
Well, I'm so sorry that you're going through that. And thank you for sharing it.
Thank you.
And your approach to it is beautiful. You know, I think that it's just something that nobody can ever, it's like a club you don't want to belong to, especially when something really happens that fast. It's impossible to process. I've been through that a few times. My wife's mother passed away from pancreatic cancer within a few months of being diagnosed. So like really fast for her. Mine was a longer, more drawn out thing. But how do you process that? As positive as you are, there's, how do you not become a victim of this? This doesn't happen to people like me. This, it's tough. You can't always be positive.
And I want to emphasize the word that you just used, victim.
Yeah.
I will not be a victim, which is number one.
Yeah.
And yes, this was a terrible journey. And I could go through the ups and downs that we went through, and there were many of them, as I'm sure you know, the amount of layers and the badge that you wear to enter this club, which is, by the way, gigantic.
Yeah.
Who knew how gigantic this club was and really is. But you cannot succumb to that journey. All I have ever wanted to do was try and say, okay, these are the cards that were dealt with. How are we going to deal with it? And how are we going to get through it? Yeah. You have to see the positive, because you really could go to the end of the world otherwise and say, why me? Why did this happen? Why us? Why him, 39 years old?
Yeah.
Why the kids? Why? You could ask all of those questions, but what's the point? We don't have those answers. But what we do have the answers are, we are living, we are breathing, and hopefully we have a long time to do that. And if we don't, then that comes our day. But until such time, make the bloody most of it. That's all I say.
I love that.
And I think my husband had that approach too.
Yeah.
And I caveat this with, I lost my brother at a young age.
Wow.
I was 23, he was 19 at the time. I'm one of 5, I'm the eldest. And so that's what spearheaded our move to New York. After he passed, we were like, sod it, we're going. We're going to go on adventure. Let's seek an adventure and try and combine our life with adventure and reality. And that approach has really stayed true to this day. Even though I've had the unimaginable happen this year, I'm still on that adventure, on that realistic adventure, and it doesn't stop. What's happened to him? It's happened to him and us as a ripple effect has made us want to live more and just do more.
Yeah.
But with that comes a balance.
Yeah, I mean, you walked in this studio and we kind of looked at each other, and it was just like, man, things are crazy and the holiday season and all the things. And, and I said, I just, I kind of know and feel like I haven't been present, the way that I need to be and the way that I usually am, it's a non-negotiable for me. But there are certain times that, that there's seasons and things of that nature, right? That you have clients in from out of town and you have ICSE and you have all these things where it's, it kind of is impossible to always be balanced.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think when it's unbalanced, if you can take the moment, and I think what I've learned in the last 2 years is just living for the hour or the day and forgetting about what's tomorrow. You're here today. And if you can't be present in the time, in the Christmas period, be present in the day, be present in the hour. Forget about the chaos that surrounds that hour and just hone in.
Yeah.
And know that whatever falls on the wayside, we'll pick it up. We'll figure it out. It doesn't matter. We will figure it out as long as you're just focused.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to come in here and talk about like hot yoga and Pilates.
Oh, we could talk about that too.
Let's do it.
I mean, that was my therapy this last year.
Yeah. So what do you like to do?
I'm a hot yoga person. I'm a Pilates person, so you nailed it.
Yeah.
I used to CrossFit and run marathons, and I've kind of changed that tempo to strive for that balance in life. Yeah. Because my life feels like a whole CrossFit marathon, I would say.
So you're a high performing individual in all areas of your life. I
subconsciously am, yes.
Subconsciously.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. What is your favorite Pilates and hot yoga like places to go?
I love Reformer.
Yeah.
I think East River Pilates, where I live in Williamsburg, has got it down.
Okay.
The accessibility, the level, the quality. I love the different levels of easy, medium, difficult approach.
Reformer, not Megaformer.
Not Megaformer.
Yeah.
I'm not that young. I don't know if I can do Megaformer these days. I've tried it a few times.
Well, a reformer can be really difficult too.
Yes, although I think it's more intense when you slow down rather than speed up.
Well, yeah, for sure.
And I'm a speedy uppy type of person, so when I slow down, it's really challenging.
Exactly, which is why I think it's not very natural, for like strength trainer, men who just like to throw weights around. You get them on a reformer, forget it.
Oh, it's brilliant.
I've been humbled. It's very difficult.
It is difficult, and it's really great to see the differences between the many aspects of yoga, Pilates, etc., and between men and women and everyone really. The same applies for hot yoga. I love Modo. Modo has survived through the pandemic, which is a badge of honor for them, I would say. Again, the accessibility and the space is beautiful, and what they create, their schedules the programming is just fantastic. I'd like to say get there long enough during the week, but I take 90-minute classes and you can't make enough time for that. So I try and do that at least once a week. Okay. At least, just for my sanity. Yeah. Yoga really was my therapy, and I keep saying to my yoga teacher that he took me on a journey and he didn't even know it. Yeah. During the last 2 years.
Yeah, I get it.
And it brings out an emotional connection to yourself that you wouldn't necessarily carve out the time for.
Yeah, fitness for me has completely been a mental. It is therapy to me. The byproduct of looking better and feeling better and all the things, are awesome. But like for me, if I don't have the time to kind of like beat the demons through something kind of challenging every day, I'm miserable and, not able to put my best foot forward. It's clarity to me.
Yesterday is an example of how I could have approached the kids with a really short fuse, but because I went to yoga the day before, I had myself together and I was giving myself a little...
Good for you.
And I was like, right, this is why you do yoga.
Yeah.
So that you don't have a short fuse, that you have patience, that you're able to breathe and take a second. I'm not saying that I don't do other sport because of that reason, but it helps me to be a better person. Mm-hmm. in myself.
Yeah.
And in turn for others.
Yeah. What else do you do? Is there any other like kind of routine that you follow or things that have changed your perspective on life and helped you grow?
So much. Staying on the fitness level, I'd say the cold plunges are really, really good for me.
Me too. What do you like about them?
No matter how hard the day you're facing, that cold is going to get you, and you can still face that too.
Yeah.
And once you've done your 6 minutes or your 3 minutes or however long you want to go, you're like, yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
If I can do that, I kind of can do anything today.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it.
No,
What
I
about you?
agree. It's funny because a lot of people talk about, how it's just, there's no necessarily like scientific, not enough data behind it.
Fine.
And again, for me, it's really about how I feel. Everything I do is how I feel. So even if it's placebo, I don't, that's fine, right? Like,
Agree.
But for me, I've been really trying to work on neutrality where I try not to experience high highs and low lows. So if I could be just kind of like at the same, if my, just kind of same beat, regardless of how great or terrible something is, like, and an ice bath for me has really helped in a lot of ways for that, where I just, if I'm stressed out on the road, so to speak, and like somebody does something stupid, like I'm just chill.
And it also, quite literally, but it also just cuts that moment, right?
Yeah.
It's cutting. It's like, okay, put it behind you.
Yeah.
We're here.
Totally.
Move forward.
Yeah.
And that cold effect just shifts your mind's perspective.
Totally.
When I was in London for the summer after everything that happened, I was staying at my father's, which is not recommended for anyone at this age with their 2 kids. So I was like, I need to get a cold plunge.
Yeah.
If I don't get a cold plunge, I got one of those mobile things.
Sure.
And I would just do that every morning.
Yeah.
And the days that I didn't do it, I was not a nice person.
Yeah.
The days that I did do it, I had such better mental clarity.
I totally agree.
I was nicer to everyone. I could handle the day better.
Yeah.
And I was focused. And I think, again, back to that neutrality that you speak of, it's balance.
It is. Yeah. Well, it's resilience too, right? It's discipline and resilience and being able to, I think it's really important in life I think the more stress that you can endure and the more discipline that you can put into your life and the more you become comfortable in the uncomfortable, the more you can achieve, not just professionally, but just in life.
Totally. I think where I was going to say something, but I've completely forgotten what I was going to say on that matter.
It's quite all right.
I had a thought. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't be sorry. It's a beautiful thing. Where do you want to go with the conversation? You pick your path here.
I could go anywhere.
You want to talk about retail real estate?
Sure. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
Let's do it.
I love it. I love retail real estate.
What do you want to talk about?
Let's talk about trends.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of, obviously the fitness, wellness stuff that we're talking about definitely follows along with, especially with what I do. Like I'm a complete geek when it comes to, like, that's why I'm like literally asking you about your hot yoga and Pilates things just for my own needs at the moment, so to speak. But so what do you think what's the current state of the market from your perspective? And you have such a wide lens, which is interesting.
The pattern that we're seeing right now is quite uniform across the board. You've got some really good talent entering the market or already existing in the market that want to do more. You've got a lack of space or growth or capital. So both are peaking at the same time. And then the survival of the fittest or the best stays in place, but really has to compensate or compromise, I should say, for the gaps. And those gaps can be quite detrimental. And they all deserve a place. I think since the pandemic, we've seen huge talent survive or enter this market and really deserving of a spot in these places. But how do you support these initiatives and how do you allow for them to grow? And from the retail perspective, from a landlord's perspective, you see that there's huge demand. It's trying to understand the quality of that demand, the conversion of that demand, and the longevity of it.
Sure.
As a consumer.
Yeah. Put your other hat on.
Yeah, I believe in all of it. And I think that there is a place for it all, but it has to be curated intentionally and you have to really be there with a purpose.
Yeah.
And that's why the why is the biggest part, or essentially the crux of the conversation between landlord and tenant and in the retail world.
How does Jamestown intentionally curate?
We look at the void. And we also try and manipulate traffic patterns within our portfolio to really encourage accessible, inclusive spending habits, right? But first and foremost, making it a place. So do you feel like this is a community? Can you contribute to that community? You can't just open your doors when you come to a Jamestown project. You have to open your doors, welcome them in, and keep them there. How are you going to do that? We will help you to do it if you're willing to participate.
Sure.
But some people may not have the bandwidth, it might not be brand aligned. There are lots of aspects that might not make sense here.
Right.
But if it does, it could be a beautiful thing. And so the way that we curate is really identifying the void, making sure that that operator is sound, they know what they're doing, they can identify the same void that we're trying to fill, and then we come together to approach it as, okay, hey tenant, what do you offer? Tenant asks landlord, what do you offer? Well, we've got an annual programming calendar where we would love for you to participate in. How can we support you in there? How can we bring more people to your location? And really having this cyclical behavior pattern where you're collaborating and contributing to a place that means something not just to you but to your customer.
Yeah, which I think is pretty rare in like the landlord developer mindset. I think you guys are way more connected as partners, with your tenants that you're bringing in, intentionally and seeking out intentionally. So many deals are more just transactional, like,
right.
There's X square footage available there. And, and I see a lot of landlords make decisions that I scratch my head on, with choosing a horse that I wouldn't bet on, so to speak, versus somebody knowing that there's multiple, hats in the ring, so to speak, and landlords, in my opinion, getting it wrong, choosing the wrong horse for a specific project. And I think what you said is the way it should be done. But it's not always done that way.
It's not.
Yeah.
I think it's the harder route to choose.
Yeah.
It requires more attention, more hands-on, more getting into the weeds.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll see scenarios where both sides don't want to get into the weeds together. They just want a simple, traditional real estate transaction and agreement, and they'll figure it out and go on their own paths. That's totally fine. And that works in places where you're not trying to create.
Yeah, magic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you can tell us you want to be at this specific property, but there's got to be a why.
Sure.
You can't just, and even if it's for the traffic that's there, the high traffic or the like-minded co-tenants, it's got to be the full package because you can't just choose one route. We like it if our operators are on site, if the owners of the business,
which is not always possible.
Correct, and we understand that because we want you to grow too.
Yeah,
exactly. But at least at the beginning, to make sure that you're sealing your brand, you're sealing your identity, and you're sealing the quality of your execution to the outside world, because that's why we chose you to be here. And I say chose, it's I don't want to sound pompous. It's not a choice, but
you're choosing each other,
exactly.
right? I mean, it is a partnership,
exactly,
or it should be a partnership, right? As opposed to one side winning.
Correct.
Yeah, which is really my job, right? That's how I approach everything. Like, I think it's the only way that things are going to work really, really well is if both parties really want to do business together for the right reasons, and the deal, maybe each side feels like they gave up a little too much, and that's a good deal.
Exactly. As long as both sides feel that way.
Exactly, not one, right? And that's really the intention of somebody who, kind of bridges that gap.
I think essentially we're facing the same challenges on either side of the table in our own fields, and we're coming together to try and merge and see if you're not successful, we're not successful.
Exactly. You don't want the space back in a year and a half, and
who likes a dark space?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't.
Yeah.
And I know that majority of people don't. So I think it's important, even just seeing the lights on helps, but what are you going to do inside those four walls to keep the lights on?
So what's one story of maybe a brand that you guys have partnered with that is an emerging concept or something that's unique that you're proud of?
It's a good question. I'm not sure what I'm allowed to disclose here, but I can give you kind of big picture.
Yeah, that's fine.
We like to have our hand in creating and conceptualizing.
Yeah.
We try and stay away from the incubation word, because incubation has
too early
or too defined or too specific, because really we're not there every day making the tacos, are we? We're helping to make sure it's successful, but we're not putting the grind in like the operator is. But what we do is hold the prospective tenant's hand and say, hey, we know what works in this specific location. We can help you to curate whichever concept you want and you think that would work here to make sure that it is a success. Let's look at the menu. Let's look at the pricing, the items. Let's look at your back of house operation. Let's look at how you would actually fit out the space. Let's look at how you're presenting color-wise and your logo and your branding, everything, so that it's at least lending itself to that space, to that place, rather than, it doesn't have to be 100%. It can be 50% lent to that specific location and 50% lent to their existing brand. But what we like to do is try and really hold their hand and look at the data as well. Like, if we've been in this certain market for X amount of years, we can look at the consumer spending, we can look at the traffic patterns, we can look at what's hitting, what's not hitting. And I think that's really where the true partnership comes from. From a health and wellness standpoint, I think we're always still learning as a landlord. And I don't know, you can tell me why this is, but I think we're always learning. I don't think we're as close to it as we'd like to be. I think there's a lot of newcomers in this sector, but they're all impressive, right? And they all have a good following. I think we all show our commitment to health and wellness in some fashion. It's how do we create that longevity? And that's, I would say, from a landlord perspective, the only reservation that we would have is, how long is this going to last, and how can we get them to last longer? Or how can we help them to be more successful than they are? Yeah,
no, it's a great question. And we're actually adding service lines within Sabre because we've seen great brands fail for many reasons, right? Whether it's capital constraints or maybe growing too fast and not knowing exactly what that means. And from a talent perspective, the right hires when, depending on what stage you're at, and how to build things that look really beautiful but aren't imported marble from Italy.
Exactly.
and so on and so forth. And having done it for brands successfully on numerous occasions at this point, there's a lot of, it's not rocket science, right? So like when you've there were a ton of learnings from scaling Solid Core from 10 locations to we're at like 110. And
brilliant.
For a corporate group fitness concept, that's never been done before, which is pretty crazy, right? So like having been involved in Orange Theory from the first studio and Chipotle touring, New York with Steve Ells at the beginning of New York Chipotle, right? And and being involved in Starbucks at a pretty early time, which is really where I learned the business, you start to see just these businesses are not so dissimilar, right? Like the growth, the things that you need to do really well, and the people, the experts that you need on your team, essentially in each seat, right? Like you need a really good real estate strategy, person. You need a really good construction, person.
Yeah.
You need operations is something I don't have a lot of experience in, but it's critical, right? Like all these things need to fire on all cylinders, or you're not going to be able to grow to 100 plus, corporately owned locations. It's just not possible.
So do you think that's the common denominator between all of these examples that you've given, that if you're not firing on all of those cylinders, it's hard to achieve?
It's impossible.
Yeah.
I learned that from Starbucks.
Yeah.
That's where I first was exposed to the machine that was so well built that everybody owned their role and was so good at that. And it's impossible to build you have to have a pipeline of that's so deep, right? And you have to be so stringent on your deal terms, and you can't be giving certain things up because you're falling in love with real estate or, and it's definitely more difficult to do early on in the growth process, but the outliers do it really early.
So does that mean you have to be well established in all of those cylinders?
You can get lucky.
Right. And I think that's the irony that I'm seeing is you've got to have a chance somewhere. Yeah, right?
Of course.
Who's going to take the chance on you?
Correct.
And how can they support you on that chance?
That's
and
right.
I believe that we're well positioned for that.
You
as a
are,
landlord.
which is very unique. Like what you're saying about how you curate intentionally is, again, that's, you're helping these tenants be successful. But there's only so much you could do also, right? Like
exactly. And that's managing expectations
Correct.
at the same time. I think you've got to start somewhere. You've got to try and figure out how to partner with them and then let them do what they need to do to a certain point. And then make sure that you're checking in and learning about the brand's growth or learning about the challenges that they're facing. One big challenge that we're seeing over and over again is the operation, is staffing.
And marketing.
Exactly.
Right? I've seen so many failures with marketing where a lot of money was spent and it didn't work, or it was
right.
Especially
seeing the overseas brands coming into the US market, when they see the behemoth that we are, they're like, well, we did not expect to turn that marketing budget into 4x or whatever it was, because it's a different beast.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen fails where companies were spending money like in markets they weren't in, like unknowingly, so to speak, where like the marketing department completely failed, like things of that nature with brands that, again, look like they're doing really well on the surface, right? Like, and that when you're in my position and you get under the hood of these businesses, and same with you, but there's so many companies that look like they're doing really, really well that somebody who's not in the industry or doesn't really understand, doesn't, have access to financials or is not sitting down with the founder or the C-suite of a company and talking about where they're at. Perception is not always reality.
Which is why I think, again, the irony is if they're super talented in that subject matter expertise.
Correct.
And so if you're a good operator, you're a fantastic operator in terms of the physicality of the business, how to run the business. You may not be the best chef if we're speaking of food and bev, or you may not be the best instructor if it's in health and wellness, but you know how to run a business.
That's critical. Let's like highlight that and double click that, because just because you're a really good instructor doesn't mean you're going to be good at opening a fitness concept and scaling it.
And that's what we find ourselves talking about time and time again.
Right.
Is it possible to be both? And if you are both, what's lacking elsewhere? We're not perfect human beings, right? We can't get it right all the time. So what we try to do is identify where could the challenges come up at whichever point of the life cycle, and how can we help to either overcome them or face them together. Yeah. And so it's all about learning about these businesses day in, day out. What makes them tick, what doesn't. It's like being an insurance company.
Totally.
And I think it's not just pure retail. We're not just pure retail leasing. Like there comes in a huge approach of how do we look at this universally? How do we look at this as what can they be doing? What are their downfalls? How can we make up for them? And who can we introduce as a partner or as an advisor or just a friend?
Totally.
To give some tips. We love to really cross-pollinate our co-tenants.
Yeah.
And so what works for them, what didn't work for them, let's just share those stories.
Yeah.
Because what's the point in reinventing the wheel?
Yeah, and it just helps everybody. There's, collaboration, I think, is one of the most exciting things about, what we do and, the folks we have access to and people at the top are always collaborating, not competing.
Yeah.
And that's fun.
Yeah, agreed.
Where do you see the world of retail going? Like, give us a peek around the corner if you could.
I think there are so many more interesting places to build. I think they're going to be in markets that aren't exactly having a huge flag.
Secondary markets?
Maybe even tertiary, I would say. As a result.
I love tertiary markets.
So do I.
I love it.
It's so exciting. So much to do. I kind of want to run before I can walk, but I need to slow down.
It's also where, the value of a company becomes so much greater if it works in a tertiary market.
I used to work for someone very smart who used to say, don't bother trying to be successful in New York first. Start out and then come in.
Yeah.
And that was huge for me. I started to look at it completely differently. If you can master those tertiary markets, then you've nailed it.
Exactly.
So I think that's really where you're seeing a pattern of growth in the retail world. There isn't enough online data, e-commerce data to really point to that consumer behavior because it might be a fraction of what you see in the major cities. But if you can hone in on that consumer and get it right, you don't need numbers. You just need quality.
Right.
And I think that's where I'm particularly excited about. I also think that the world of retail, as much as AI is going to change everything, it's not all at the same time. In retail in particular, you still need to touch, feel, see, breathe, taste.
Yeah.
And there'll always be four walls. It's just how do you think about it more intentionally?
Totally,
and where can you convert efficiently?
Right.
I think Europe is a big market for growth. I think it's primed for that. I think the more that time goes by, the more it lends itself to a US market.
Yeah.
More so than ever. There aren't as many places created as there are in the US that you can find that has all of these interesting attributes like a Jamestown project does.
Right.
So there's a lot to do there, and I'm excited about that. But I think we're just going to see less but more intentional openings across the board.
What project in your purview are you most excited about right now?
There are so many. In the US, Charleston's a really interesting market for me. I think we all know that Charleston has seen an influx of people moving over there, mainly young professionals with disposable income that want just a simpler life, less expensive, more intentional, can work from home or create their own business. Mm-hmm. Charleston's that place. Yeah. And Charleston's tiny.
Yeah, Acadia invested a ton on King Street.
Right. Yeah. So King Street's really the only retail spot you can think of
Yeah.
today. There's more to that, and
Yeah.
I think there'll be more to that. We've got a project in North Charleston called Charleston Navy Yard. We love a lot of adaptive reuse, and that's
Sure.
the epitome of it.
Yeah.
It's still somewhat of a functioning Navy Yard, but there is a development there that we're involved in and really excited about, and we're really in the early stages of just
Nice.
creating a place. But that really is the idea of what Jamestown is, creating a place but slowly over phases. I don't know if you know Industry City.
Sure.
Right? So Industry City in Brooklyn was also a project that was a long time coming, a lot of effort into it, 6 million square feet of mixed use. And it's a place. Today it's a place, and we're happy and proud of that. Charleston will be quite similar.
Very
So
cool.
watch the space.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Thank you. We're excited.
Good. Good.
Where else is there that's exciting in the portfolio or just in retail in general? Europe. Keep your eyes on Europe. I'm intrigued to see if any American brands go over there.
Yeah. I'm only used to bringing international brands to New York, essentially, right?
Exactly.
So I don't have the experience on the flip.
No, the experience on the flip is interesting.
Yeah.
It's a different,
sure.
It's a different beast.
Yeah.
As much as it is this way, it's that way too.
Yeah.
And I think the spending habits are different, which is first and foremost. I think we really need to learn who our customer is over there and how we can actually target them in a successful way.
Right.
It's definitely not the way that we do it here.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Everything that's like data driven, which is so much easier today. I mean, there's so much more access to data than we ever had. It was always done, when we would create a strategy, we would just use, really basic demographic information and pedestrian foot counts and,
How many times in back in the day have you stood on the corner watching?
Oh, too many. But I feel like that was such a great way to learn.
100%.
And it's great to have the data, but it's also, I feel like we're very fortunate to have done it the old school way and have, understand how to do it without, the Placer and Buxton and all that stuff, which is great information too, obviously.
Totally. I think first-hand information is the best-hand information, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And standing on a street corner, watching the traffic morning, noon and night is the best way to learn your market. It's how I was taught. It's how you were probably taught.
Definitely.
And then canvassing.
Yeah.
If it's not part of your model today, I think it needs to be in general. But they don't make them like they used to. So it's encouraging those to really just be out there and be part of the footprint, be part of that community to really get an understanding of it, which goes back to our comment at the beginning, which is if you don't love what you do and it's not part of your life, how do you actually really get into it if you can't make it such?
Yeah, I don't think you could be great at anything that you're not obsessed with.
Correct. You could also be terrible if you're obsessed with it too, because you're.
Can you be over time?
I think you can. I think you can be really too into it sometimes.
Yeah.
Balance.
Yeah, which we're working on.
Yeah.
We're gonna close out with our message on being obsessed and balanced.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
it's a great mantra for today: obsessed and balanced.
So, where can people find you if they wanted to reach out?
Social media at the London New Yorker. I'm trying to balance again Instagram and my relationship with it, trying in and out with that one. Otherwise at Jamestown, you'll know where to find me, Chelsea Market. I'm walking there nearly every day.
Amazing.
So that's me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been really enjoyable.
Likewise.
And let's try to take our foot off the gas and be present.
Present today. Just today.
In the moment.
In the moment.
Thank
you for having me.
Thank you for joining me.
I just wanna have peace. Pay for the bill, let them take my card, never see the receipt. Good health, we prize, but everybody around prosperity. I just wanna have peace.